What's going on, hikers? In today's video, we're going to answer the question, how many miles should you hike in a day? If you're new to the channel, my name is Jeremiah Stringer, and here we talk about all things hiking and backpacking. So if you're into that kind of thing, consider subscribing. My quick backstory is, I hiked the Vermont Long Trail, which is a little bit under 300 miles not too long ago. And as I was preparing for the hike, I thought, well, how many miles should I hike in a day? And I started doing research and I thought, man, this is a question that really needs to be answered. So after experiencing that for, 3 weeks straight, I feel like I got a pretty good answer for you. Now, it is going to depend on quite a few variables. In no particular order, let's start off with how experienced of a hiker are you? Now, myself, I've been adventuring for a little while now, and going into this trip, I kind of knew, what my skill sets were, and kind of what my strengths and weaknesses were when it comes to backpacking. So I was starting to dial in my gear, and I thought, well, I'm not going to need as much time to set up my camp because I'm very, very familiar with my gear. But if you're not, maybe you're just starting out, it may take you a little bit more time. You need to make sure you get done before it starts getting dark outside. So you may have to turn the miles down. Or if you're like me and you're pretty familiar with your gear, then you can really hike a little bit longer during the day and up the miles just a little bit. Now, on average, I would say a normal hiking day, I'm hiking anywhere between 2 and 3 miles per hour if you were to add up the miles and divide by how long I hiked. So with keeping that in mind, it also depends on how fast of a hiker are you. Now, if you have no idea, I'll tell you a good way that you can figure it out. Pick yourself maybe a loop or an out and back and walk it and see how long it takes you. And then, you can do that math, how many miles you walked divided by how many hours it took you, and that's telling you on average how fast you're walking. There are some apps and some like Fitbits, Garmin's, those kind of things that also tell you how fast you're walking while you're out on trail. Another variable that it would really depend on how far you should walk when you're hiking during the day is what's your fitness level. Now, I'm not the most fit person in the world, but if you had to talk to me 2 or 3 years ago, whenever I weighed 100 pounds more, I wouldn't walked half as far as I can now. So on the Vermont Long Trail, I was walking, I started off doing like 6 miles on the first day, 7 miles on the second day, and I started making my way up in mileage each day. And actually by the end of it, I could crank out, a 20-mile day. But there are some dangers in that. See, my fitness level, like I said, I'm not the most fit, but I'm fairly fit, and my backpack doesn't weigh a ton, so I can walk a little bit farther, a little bit faster. So while I was out on trail, I overestimated how far I could walk in a day, and within the first, week or so that I was out there doing my thru hike, I actually got injured just from overexertion. I did a couple 20-mile days, and that pushed me past my limit, and I even had to take a zero and recover from those days. And then that just sets you back. So don't overestimate it either. The next thing to consider is, what about how heavy your gear is? So of course, the heavier your gear is, typically the lower the miles you're going to be able to do. And there's nothing wrong with having really, really light gear, really low base weight, or really heavy gear because you like to bring a lot of luxuries with you. It's all about the experience out there on trail. But I'm kind of middle tier. Maybe as I get older, my body's a little bit more beat up, I'll go more ultralight because my body just can't take the strain of that heavier gear. But I'm kind of in the middle. And if you're where I'm at, if you could get your base weight down more, you could probably walk more miles. And if you bring more luxuries, depending on how much you bring, or maybe you got budget gear and it just weighs more, it may mean that you have to take your miles down a notch. Another thing to consider is, how familiar with the trail are you? Is this a trail that you've hiked before? If it is, you may be able to hike more miles on that trail because you don't have to worry about taking a wrong turn or know you're going in the right direction. But if it's a trail that you're not familiar with, then you may have to crank down the mileage just to make sure that you're staying on track and to give yourself enough leeway if you do hit something that you weren't expecting. Which leads me to another point. What is the topography, or topography, I guess I should say? What is the elevation change, and what location are you going to be hiking in? You know, if you're hiking a 14,000 footer, your mileage is going to go way down. But maybe you're, hiking a small mountain, and that's not going to be a very big deal on the elevation change to you. Maybe it's around what you're used to. You can probably up your mileage a little bit. But again, be careful. Leave yourself enough leeway, because my wife and I, we hiked the Foothill Trail, or the Foothills Trail with Kristen and Kevin. Shout out to you guys. Love you guys. We hiked the Foothills Trail with them, and the mileage was very, very high. It was like 15 miles, almost 50 miles every day. And my wife got injured and had to leave a day early and not even be able to finish the trail. So keep in mind your elevation change. Typically, as the elevation's going up and you got less oxygen up there, especially you get over 10,000 feet, it's going to really affect your system. It can actually make you really sick. You may have to, decline in elevation just to feel okay. So as you can see, it's very hard for me to put a number on how many miles you should hike every day. You got so many variables. You got your fitness level, you got what location you're going to, you got the familiarity that you have with the trail, you got how much your gear weighs, how familiar you are with the gear, and something that I forgot to even mention was how many hours of daylight are you even going to have during the day. If you're going during the summer, you're going to have a lot more daylight. You go during the winter, it may get dark at 4:30, 5 o'clock. So you have to keep all those factors in mind. Now for me, in the fall, I normally don't like to go much over 10 miles per day. And that's just my preference, because I'll get going and then I hit the 10-mile mark and then I start to decline on my motivation. And so my life gets more and more and more tough as I'm going over the 10 miles. Sometimes if you're through hiking, you just got to put in the miles and that's the way it is. But if you're going on the weekend, normally kind of like what I do, 2 or 3 days, I would stick probably, depending on all those variables, less than 10 miles and just enjoy the experience. And if you think you can do more than that, go for it, try it. But always keep in mind that if you have to bail out, make sure you have a good plan. If you're wanting to train up to do bigger miles, do that. The more and more you hike, the more in shape you are. The lower your base weight is getting. As long as you're comfortable with your gear and comfortable out on trail and enjoying everything, the more experience that you get, the more miles you're typically going to be able to do. Especially if you're stringing days together. Like I was gone for over 3 weeks doing my through hike, and you get to where you can crank out those 20-mile days. Just try to avoid injury at all costs. Be proactive. You got to listen to your body. If you're not feeling it and you got to take a 0, do it. If you're not feeling it because you're hurting, you're all blistered up, you got to recover, or you're super sore, lower the mileage. Do what's best for you. I want you to tell me in the comments below, what did I forget? What variables should I also include? And how many miles are you hiking on average each day that you go out? If you enjoyed the video, make sure you smash the like button, subscribe for more, kick the notification bell for the latest notifications. We'll see you in the next video. I had to take a 0 while I was out on trail doing a through hike, and sorry, the dogs, I think they hear their mom.